It's the story causing the police department a media frenzy. Another officer involved shooting. This time was two. Take a look.
Two Corpus Christi police officers are on paid administrative leave while one officer and another man are recovering in the hospital. It happened just after 2 o'clock this morning after an altercation at the Sunset Rodeo nightclub. Two officers were working off duty when officers responded to a call for emergency backup. Upon investigation, it was found one of the off-duty officers had been assaulted, prompting him to discharge his gun and shoot a man. The officer and man were taken to separate hospitals with non-life-threatening injuries. If you have any information, you're asked to call the Criminal Division at 886-2840 or 888-TIPS.
Now there is some explanation about off-duty versus on-duty authority. If you're on duty, that means probably you're working on duty. So what's the difference between off-duty and on-duty? Here's Lexus Green.
We know tonight. Lexus?
Mike, Leslie, both the officer and the man were taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The man who was shot now facing charges of assault on an officer. We also spoke with businesses in the Country Village Shopping Center who say this incident has them shaken up. They did not want to be identified, but did have this to share.
Well, it's kind of bad because somebody got shot. We saw the whole Corpus Christi Police Department was here.
That business owner describing the scene that night. We sat down with Lieutenant Michael Pena of CCPD for clarification on the authority of an off-duty and on-duty officer.
I think the confusion is that when they hear bar, not many people realize that officers do work off-duty in a capacity at bars.
Lieutenant Pena says off-duty refers to when an officer is hired to provide service that is not by the city, but by another business or organization, such as the mall, church, or sporting event.
Say at the movie theater, there's an officer working off-duty. He has the same authority that he had while he's working at the police department responding to calls for service.
According to Pena, that authority does come with being in uniform, including their protection. And the law states that in order to be charged with assault on a police officer, that means that they are identified as an officer and have a uniform on.
The officers in this incident were dressed in uniform, as you see me right now, so there's no doubt that it was an officer.
Officers saying this is still an ongoing investigation and witnesses are being interviewed. I spoke with family of the man who was shot, who say they will not be speaking with us until they meet with their lawyer, but they do say he is expected to recover. Lexus Green, 3 News.
All right, Lexus, thank you for that.
Wow. Now here again is Lexus Green talking more about off-duty and on-duty, because that's what we talked about. If you see an officer in uniform at a bar or whatever, that means he's off duty. But he still works for the police department, whether it's a he or a she. But there's a lot more to this. Let me see. Here again is Lexus Green.
Thanks, Leslie and Rudy. I'm here outside of that nightclub where that altercation took place. And one of the questions that many of our viewers had was, what was the off-duty officer's position here at this business? And according to CCPD, it is very common for officers to serve and be paid not from the city, but from private organizations, businesses such as the mall, sporting events, even churches.
Say at the movie theater, there's an officer working off-duty. He has the same authority that he had while he's working at the police department responding to calls for service.
According to Pena, Texas law states that in order to be charged with assault on a police officer, that means they are identified as an officer or wearing a uniform.
The officers in this incident were dressed in uniform, as you see me right now, so there's no doubt that it was an officer.
Officers saying that this is still an ongoing investigation and witnesses are being interviewed. Family of the man who was shot says they are not speaking yet until they meet with their attorney and that he is expected to recover. Lexus Green, 3 News.
All right, Lexus, thank you for that report.
So once they have the attorneys present, we'll keep you posted on what's been going on. In future, give me a break. We'll let you know what happens. Because let me tell you something. I support our local police officers, but when people are off duty doing non-off duty things, like I don't know. I just simply can't be sure. I mean, when I see an off-duty police officer, it just basically means that. What it basically means is, they're either at a sporting event, at a movie theater, or at school. That's when I see an off-duty police officer. Being paid for by an organization. That's how it is. It's retrospective time to where we look back at the stories I've talked about, where I've showed you. In this case, I talked about that love scam that we talked about. That love scam, sudden acceleration, title laundering, and Catherine Cryer's story. I'll give you my perspective when we return. Stay with us. Sometimes when I show Dateline stories, I never tell you my own retrospective. And in these cases right here we're talking about, I can give you my own retrospective from what was being talked about. And that's especially with the case with the sweetheart swindle. Now, you remember in our Love Scams episode, we showed you a clip from that Dateline episode where a girl named Rosie, where these family members were targeting older men, saying, "Oh, I know this person. I know you for your mother, this and this," and trying to take advantage of them and stealing their money. In case you missed it, here's some
Just want to
snippets.
get your side of the story here.
But that's none of your business, okay?
Rosie, members of your family had...
Here's some snippets. I mean, in case you missed it, here's a portion.
He promised to send George the money. So far, George hasn't received a penny. We decided it was time to pay Rosie a visit. We caught up with her in front of the flower shop where she first met George.
Hi, Rosie. Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC. How are you today?
That's good.
Do you remember George? Do you remember George?
No,
The man you went to go visit in New York?
no.
Let me just show you this videotape. Is that you?
Yeah,
Okay. Who is that woman with you?
that's my aunt.
Your aunt? What's her name?
Well, that's none of your business.
We asked Rosie if she told George the truth.
I did not lie to him.
You told him that you had traded in some airline tickets and that you left the money on the
explained that to
dresser.
him. I told him that, and I had to send it to him. But someone stole it.
Somebody stole it. Well, we have evidence here that you traded in the tickets and made $2,800.
Would you stop following me?
Well, I just want to get your side of the story here.
But that's none of your business, okay?
Rosie, members of your family have been accused of taking advantage of elderly men.
Would you go away from me?
Rosie hurried off and went to a payphone down the street. A few moments later, Steve arrived to pick her up. We tried to talk to Steve, but he sped away. And we had some questions for the Loio women, too. We wanted to ask about some of the elderly gentlemen in their past. We went to the Loio family home in Sacramento, where we caught up with Anna, the matriarch of the Loio family.
I'm Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC. Why is it that you Two of your daughters and a daughter-in-law are all named in suits alleging that you've taken advantage of elderly men.
Oh, come on now, get away from me. Don't try that.
What do you mean don't start that? What's going on? Why are you and your daughters
Elderly
named
men
in
of
suits?
what? Of what?
Well, like
Of
this
what?
man, Harry Champion. Do you know him?
Oh, get out of here. That's
know
my
him?
son-in-law. That's the liar right there.
What do you
That's the Dimitro family, the liar.
The Dimitro family, one of your daughter's aliases is Dimitros.
Oh, please.
Why all the aliases,
Talk to my
Anna?
lawyer. Talk to my lawyer.
Can we talk to you for a minute? Anna
So here's my retrospective on this. I think the Loyal family are scammers. I think these people are scamming these elderly men. And if I was a police officer and I caught this happening, I would immediately snatch the money out of their hands or do the Judy chop. Or do that little Judy chop. You got your Judy chop, you got your ninja chop. And just say, hey, don't you dare. Don't you give her that money. But I'm glad something needs to be happening here, and if it ever happens to you, you need to contact the police department. So that's my perspective on Chris Hansen's take on what happened to the Loyal family. That's my retrospective. Now here's the second retrospective that I have. This was from the Rat Dog Detective Agent. The Rat Dog Dick Detective Agency. They just have their stuff on elderly men. It's the same thing. These gypsies. These are gypsy women who take advantage of older men by stealing their money. And if you missed that, here's a sneak peek.
Tip. We began our own.
Here's a snippet from Catherine Cryer.
85-year-old Uncle Andrew lived alone in New York City, rarely seeing family and friends. In the fall of 1993, he disappeared. James called emergency services and learned that his uncle was in the intensive care unit at Bellevue Hospital, mysteriously overdosed on sedatives, barbiturates, and painkillers. James rushed over to see him, but was stunned to find out that someone had barred the way.
And I asked why. And the bureaucracy at Bellevue Hospital in New York said that the wife permits no visitors. I said, what wife? He has no wife. He's not married. He's never been married.
Andrew Vlasto, a lifelong bachelor, had indeed taken a wife. This woman, Sylvia Mitchell. She had a marriage license showing she was 28, 57 years younger than Andrew. 3 weeks into his hospital stay, Andrew's condition was improving, but then he was rushed back to intensive care. Doctors were confounded by a discovery. Andrew had been given a powerful drug they did not prescribe. Digoxin, also known as Digitalis.
So my perspective is that person should not have been drugged. If you're prescribed that drug, then you should take it. But if no one prescribes you that drug, you should not be taking it. And if someone tries to take advantage of you, you walk away. Go to the police. And if that person had gotten that police protection, that scammer would have been arrested and sitting in jail, and this never would have happened. The law in this society we would like to have is younger women should not be targeting the elderly. That's common sense. Use your common sense and try to protect your elderly. If your grandfather's involved in this, you need to get them out of this. Say, hey, you don't give them back this, I'll call the police, this and this. Let them take care of it. Let the police take care of it. If you feel like they're not doing anything, talk to the police. They will handle this and they will take care of it They will take care of it like taking care of a dog. That's the lesson here. You may have heard about a case of title laundering to where a car that was salvaged junk is now salvageable by another state to be repairable. Up next, I'm going to give you my retrospective on that story, as well as that sudden acceleration story from Stone Phillips. Stay with us. Now let's move on to title laundering. If you don't know how it works, or if you missed that story, here's a snippet.
All perfectly legal.
Unrebuildable cars go to some states and they can become buildable.
It's called title laundering, and here's how it works. Every car has a title. It's like an automobile's birth certificate. Florida stamped all these cars junk right on their titles as a warning to any future buyers. But rebuilders know that different states have differing laws. So ship the car north, say to New Jersey, where the state doesn't have a junk classification. And New Jersey simply drops the Florida warning and issues a new, clean title with no clue about the car's past. Remember the car Emily Perkins bought? Salvage. But then the dealer, Benny Johnson, brought the car to Alabama and got a new, clean title. And that's exactly what happened to the Cox family's car. The salvage stamp in Louisiana disappeared in Alabama.
Hiding the history of a wreck.
It was clearly marked with the ominous warning that this was a flood car. But Iowa gave the car dealer a clean title. That flood warning just disappeared. And the very day the Jorgensens brought home their automobile, the problems began. The customers misrepresented cars and laughed and hung up on customers who complained.
They were just smug. It was like, you bought it, you're stuck with it. Too bad you lose.
My name is Bob McCune. I'm with Dayline NBC.
Oh, hi.
We've got a couple of cameras here, by the way. We're taping this.
Now here's my perspective on this. The boyfriend and girlfriend, they ain't experts. And they should have just talked about it and said, you know what? We need to fix this up. I don't want to be shut down. I don't want to be shut down again. That's what needs to happen here. And it's costing us taxpayers a lot of money. It's costing us Americans a lot of money, and we need to save the money to pay our taxes for our education or for something else. And we pay the bill. You ever heard of sudden acceleration? It's an old term being used to where drivers accidentally hit the gas instead of the brake. If you missed that episode, here is a snippet. Here's a snippet from Stone Phillips, starting with that 1989 government report.
It echoed the findings of this 1989 government report. Experts reviewed thousands of accidents involving all kinds of cars, not just Fords. Their conclusion? Pedal misapplication by the driver was the most likely cause, that it was virtually impossible for electrical failures to cause sudden acceleration. And that seemed to close the book on sudden acceleration. For years, car companies pointed to the government report and won nearly every lawsuit against them. But lately, there have been a few bumps on the road to blaming drivers. Although the automakers still deny it, juries in 3 different states have ruled that defects in cars were to blame in cases against Audi, Nissan, and General Motors.
Now that's my perspective for part 1, is that it just doesn't happen. But the question is, does anyone? How about the other? How about the mechanic?
Without you wanting it to, it can pull a wide open throttle.
Have you tested this on a real car?
Several times, yeah.
He tested this. my retrospective about this one is, as an expert mechanic in court, he knew what he saw. He knows. As for the third part, to where that mechanic showed Dateline how it's done, like Sam Silver's theory was he nicked the wire. Water evaporates. So if you were to prove it with a picture, you could win the case. Now what about that the guy from NHTSA? My perspective on this is he knew what he saw. Those 4 documents right there. Pedal error probably doesn't account for all cases. So, what you really have here is sometimes drivers hitting the gas instead of the brake. And people who say under oath, I swear to God, my foot was on the brake. When you say, I swear to God, almost always, next thing out of your mouth's a damn lie. Or if you say, I swear on my mother's grave, almost always the next thing out of your mouth's a damn lie. If your foot was on that damn brake, your foot was on the damn brake. If your foot was on the accelerator, you couldn't even hit the reverse. That's what you could have done. But at my retrospective, if my foot was on the brake, it would have been, I would have to slam down hard. Thank God I don't drive. Or else if I did, none of this would happen. Alright, let's switch gears here. When we come back, a story that I've seen over 10 times years ago. It's a story about a young couple accused of child abuse, with twists and turns. Stay with us. Let's get you up to speed here. November 30th, Oxford schools are closed November 30th to honor the 1-year anniversary of the shooting on Oxford High that killed a lot of people. Really? It should have been a prayer. Now they're closing the school to mark that anniversary? Are you crazy? You should be having kids in school there, remembering those people that died. You should not be closing down the school. This is ridiculous. This bullshit right here. What about Uvalde? Are they going to do the same thing? Nope. Just 1 hour ago, just today, there is now, from CNN, exclusive, new audio or phone call shows for the first time that a senior Uvalde officer was told children need to be rescued from inside the classroom. The calls you got from one of the students, what did they say? The dispatcher says, okay, Chloe's going to be. It's Chloe. She's in room 112. Mario, 112. He asks, how many are still alive? 8 to 9 are still alive. She's not too sure. She's not sure how many are actually DOA or possibly injured. We're trying. And it's called, okay, thanks. Disconnects. Based on analysis of surveillance body camera at the scene, he walks back to the hallway, Charles 17, and mentions the injured victims, the Border Patrol officer, 1218. He doesn't mention the children when the Texas Ranger talks to him about organizing the flow of information. So that's basically the latest from Uvalde. Now there's new latest from the Daily Free Press. Deplorable and disgusting, this honorable display shown by the Parkland Shoes defense team with tough love. It's probably because of the defense team. Now we know what happened. Because of that middle finger, it's already still an investigation, and we'll still keep you posted. Still ahead, the story of Baby Gregory. And my retrospectives from the escalator story and that airport security story. Stay with us. 10 years ago, I ran across a story about a young couple who was accused of child abuse with twists and turns, charges, and countercharges. It proved to be one of the most controversial stories I've ever talked about. Well, it was over 10 years ago, December 14, 2009, as we know it was published. But the story, it's a story about Baby Gregory. If you don't know the story of Baby Gregory, here's how it went. Here's how it went. The baby was born June 10th, 1993. More than 3 months premature. Just 17 after his birth, he was taken to Vanderbilt Children's University Medical Center. His parents suspected that his liver was not functioning properly. Having examined Baby Gregory, the doctors diagnosed nutritional problems and sunken eyes. They also diagnosed Fusidio bile ducts. They began giving Baby Gregory vitamin D and K. They also instead insisted that Cheryl Brian Bruce stop breastfeeding. Baby in the stayed at the Vanderbilt Medical Center until August 4th. But he was back on September 11th, this time because of a bleeding disorder. October 23rd, he returned to Vanderbilt because of a respiratory problem. 3 days later, back on vitamin K. On December 7th, the doctors treated Baby Gregory for severe anemia, inactual hemorrhaging, and retinal hemorrhaging. But over the course of numerous visits to the hospital, relations between the Brian Bruces and Vanderbilt became more and more strained. It was only in September 93. Cheryl Brian Bruce complained to the medical center doctors about Baby Gregory's care. She alleged that when she left for one visit, she had found the infant lying on his own vomit and feces. What's more, the Brian Bruces had suggested to Vanderbilt doctors that Baby Gregory might be suffering from Alagille disease, or Alagille syndrome, a genetic disorder linked to inactual retinal bleeding. They were concerned the doctors were ignoring their suggestions and instead were pursuing other diagnosis. 2 days before Christmas, DHS filed a petition to child abuse, and the state took custody of Baby Gregory in March 94. The Montgomery County Juvenile Court at Clarksville, where Brian Bruce was then living, ruled that there was evidence that Baby Gregory had been abused. They appealed their case to the circuit court. The abuse charges were upheld in August of 94. In the meantime, June 94, they moved to Atlanta, where they hoped to have Baby Gregory examined by doctors at Emory Elgin Hospital, pediatric care. Tennessee's Department of Human Services, however, denied the couple's request to have the child examined in Atlanta. On February 9th, they drove Baby Gregory's foster home to what was supposed to be a routine supervised visit. Instead, however, she picked up the child, walked to the car with no one stopping her, took off on her Interstate 24 South 5 hours later in Atlanta, where this happened. Tennessee's DHS rejected the argument performing a violation. But an emergency hearing in Atlanta judge then decided there was indeed a threat of mismanagement and mistreatment. Upon the strength, Gregory Brian Bruce versus Vanderbilt University alleged that a result of certain actions taken by medical center 93, 94, 95, they suffered a gross violation of civil rights. And also levels, there was lawsuits, stacking documents 4 feet high. March 28th with Crocker in hand, we're going back 3 months. This is all about a lawsuit. But now you're going to hear from the attorney who has a different point of view. And you're also going to hear from the Brian Bruces and look at that timeline. Here's Chris Hansen.
Last March, the congregation at this Atlanta church gave its support and its contributions to a couple who seemed to have it all. Cheryl Brian Bruce is a doctor, a resident at Morehouse School of Medicine. Her husband, Greg, is a former Army helicopter pilot, a decorated veteran of the Gulf War. But for 19 months, the Brian Bruces have been living under a shadow of suspicion and doubt. living under an accusation of child abuse and living without their terminally ill child who was taken away.
They took my child from me during a time in his life when I could have loved him, enjoyed him, and created the memories that would sustain me when he's gone.
The big boy now. Baby Gregory was born June 10th, 1993, more than 2 months premature at a military hospital in Ohio. It was an emergency delivery, and the baby appeared very sick.
From interacting with the physicians, it was evident that he had problems, and initially they thought he had a faulty or defective heart, and then they very quickly went to, well, he's got some liver problems.
In July of 1993, he was transferred to Vanderbilt Children's Hospital in Nashville, near where his parents then lived. This is where concerns about the baby's well-being were first raised. A hospital document filed in a Tennessee court shows that doctors at that time diagnosed the 3-month-old baby with failure to thrive, and it questioned why Cheryl Bryan Bruce, a physician, did not recognize her baby's, quote, severely malnourished state.
How can they say there was some sort of neglect when they were following this baby on a weekly basis? His weight was being followed on a weekly basis.
Dr. Bryan Bruce claims that allegations about her treatment of baby Gregory stemmed from her questioning of physicians at Vanderbilt.
That's a challenge for them. How dare this young black woman come and question us?
Vanderbilt officials say they cannot comment about the case at all because of strict confidentiality laws. But some of the Vanderbilt doctors involved told Dateline that the racial allegations by Dr. Bryan Bruce are totally false. On December 6, 1993, baby Gregory was almost 6 months old. His parents say that night he fell off a bed as Dr. Bryan Bruce was about to diaper him. The next day, Dr. Cheryl Bryan Bruce brought baby Gregory back here to Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. According to doctor's testimony, a CAT scan showed a large bruise and hemorrhage within the baby's brain. Other doctors say they found bleeding and scarring inside the baby's eyes, injuries consistent with shaken baby syndrome. Doctors believe Gregory had been physically abused. The medical evidence from the doctors at Vanderbilt was brought to the Tennessee Department of Human Services. Charles Wilson is director of Family Services.
This is an extraordinarily serious form of child maltreatment. It can cause death, it can cause brain damage, it can cause all sorts of serious long-term complications for children.
And then, on December 23rd, 1993, a court order transferred custody of baby Gregory from the family to the state of Tennessee.
Here's my perspective. Here's how it would have been. You abused this child. You're on the naughty list. We're taking the baby away. Please, please. Please don't take the baby away. Please. I swear to God, I didn't mean to. Please. Give me the baby. That's my perspective.
The Bryan Bruces say they were shocked.
I would have sense enough if I were doing horrendous things to my child, or if my husband was doing horrendous things to my child, not to parade him up under other physicians for fear that someone would see something.
Is there any possibility that Gregory could have been abused by a nanny?
No.
A relative?
No.
Another child?
No.
For more than a year, the family only saw their child on court-sanctioned visits. Then, Dr. Cheryl Bryan Bruce took matters into her own hands. In February, during a visit with baby Gregory in Nashville, she told social workers she was going to take him for a walk. Instead, she fled with the baby here to the Atlanta area. What drove you to do that?
The fear that if I didn't do anything, that my child would die in the hands of the state of Tennessee.
She brought baby Gregory to Eggleston Children's Hospital for a crucial battery of tests. Dr. Bryan Bruce hoped to show that baby Gregory's condition was caused by his liver disease, a rare disorder known as Alagille syndrome. After the test, the baby was taken back to Tennessee. For the Bryan Bruces, it was a heartbreaking moment.
They were snatching him back out of our lives. And I think that has to have been one of the worst moments in my life. The first being the first day they took him from me.
3 months after that interview came a dramatic development in this story. On June 12th, a Tennessee judge gave baby Gregory back to his parents. Overturning 2 earlier rulings, the judge relied on testimony from doctors at Egleston Hospital who said baby Gregory's condition was very possibly the result of his liver disease, not abuse.
We want to applaud the judge for making a courageous decision.
John Mayhew is one of the Bryant Bruce's attorneys.
What was the evidence that allowed you to bring this baby home to its parents? It was twofold. One, this child has a very rare condition called Alagille syndrome that affects 1 out of every 70,000 births. Number 2, this child also had documented bleeding disorders that could cause this child to bleed in its brain and in its eyes. And those conditions existed since birth. And we were able to convince the judge that those conditions were always there.
The Tennessee Department of Human Services issued a statement reacting to the ruling, expressing surprise at the court's decision. It also says the department is considering if any additional legal action is appropriate. Baby Gregory is now living at the Bryant Bruce's Atlanta area home, along with the family's 2 other children.
It was just an overwhelming sense of fulfillment and rightness about it all.
Almost like a dream, come true. I'm just too enormous to believe. And just waking up the following morning and having him right there in the bed with us was incredible. It was just unbelievable, that it was really true.
But along with the joy, there is also some anger and bitterness over what they've been through.
It's bad enough to wrongfully remove a child, but then to, over a period of 19 months, treat us as if we were common criminals, misfits in this society, was the ultimate slap in the face.
What has this 19 months done to your family?
It's been a roller coaster. We've been probably through every emotion imaginable to man and then created a few of our own.
Or, it brought us to the point where we couldn't even touch because, my touch wasn't what my wife required. She wanted to be with Gregory, and I understood that.
The Bryant Bruces say they've paid a high price, but that the one who has suffered the most in this case has been baby Gregory himself.
Gregory paid the biggest price. We hurt, but we had each other. Gregory was out there all by his little, tiny, lonesome self.
Baby Gregory's best hope for the future is a liver transplant. But sadly, that's not an option right now because his physical development was dramatically slowed by his disease. So, Gregory's long-term prognosis remains uncertain. And one final note, Vanderbilt University Hospital, which first raised the issue of abuse in this case, stands by its original diagnosis from years ago. Now here's my perspective on this. Here's what I have to say. 19 months of this? I believe that Cheryl Bryant Bruce did the right thing. The right thing for her to do was to get the baby, fly her to the Atlantic area, and figure out what was wrong. And then have Tennessee get involved and take the baby back. After all these 19 months, it was Alagille syndrome, not shaken baby syndrome. There is a difference. There is a short difference between shaken baby syndrome. And the definition of shaken baby syndrome is occurs when a parent or caregiver severely shakes the child in frustration or anger, often because the child won't stop crying. Now, in the Bryant Bruce's case, he was changing the diaper, and the child fell off the bed. That's not shaken baby syndrome. That was an accident. Now it's Alagille syndrome. As we heard from, it happens out of one every 70,000 births. Documented bleeding in the brain and its eyes. It existed since birth, and so they were able to convince the judge of this. So, my perspective on this, the one who has suffered most in this case has been baby Gregory. He's the hero in all this, as well as the family, as well as the parents. They're the heroes in this story. So, it's been over 30 years since this case ended, so Joe Bryant, Bruce, and Greg, if you're watching this and you want to come on, give me a break to share your story, I'll be more than happy to. Maybe a first for the show after 6 years of having a guest. Coming up on Wednesday, we're going to talk about Section 8. And if you don't know what Section 8 is, it's probably a voucher to where you're on a waiting list. So here's a sneak preview of that Section 8 voucher. And how it's going to play out is when I share these Dateline stories that I've watched, I watch the story. Here's what I do. I watch the story. Then I give you, depending on what's going on, if I'm in the mood, I'll give you the retrospective during the story, or after the story, or in the next episode. So, here's a preview of that Section 8 voucher.
Every year, billions of tax dollars are spent helping the poor find housing. But you'll never believe where some of that money ends up.
I don't think there's any doubt that we're wasting government money.
He says some well-off landlords are renting to their relatives and being paid to do it with your tax dollars.
It's not illegal. But is it fair, and particularly is it fair to taxpayers?
Finding the relatives a home of their own, and you pay the bill.
Yeah, you pay the bill. As well as those tire tracks to make roads, you also pay the bill. Those two stories and my retrospective on Wednesday. All this week, those retrospectives. And also along that traffic school story I have. I've been waiting to show it to you. Now, this week, I could show it to you. Either Friday or Saturday. So be on the lookout for that. That's Give Me a Break for this Monday going into Tuesday. We'll see you again for Give Me a Break Wednesday. I hope you've had a great day. For all of us here at Give Me a Break and YouTube, have a good night.